Battleship Texas shares most major characteristics that defined all dreadnought-style battleships, the primary one being the all-big gun concept. This meant eliminating the wide variety of gun sizes found on earlier ships and adding the largest possible number of the largest possible gun. For Texas, this meant installing 10 of the brand new 14-inch 45 caliber weapon. However, saying that Texas or any other dreadnought was all big gun isn't entirely true. Besides needing big bores to fight other battleships at long ranges, there was a need for protection against close threats. Before we go any farther, I want to thank Marco Marioni for his photos and Tony DeGillian, who sent me ballistic tables for the guns that I was not able to find on my own. By the way, Tony's NavWeps website should be your first stop when looking for detailed information on naval weapons. You'll find a link to it in this video's description. At the time Texas was on the drawing boards, torpedoes had developed into reliable ship killers. Even though submarines had yet to become the main threat, a little torpedo boat or light cruiser could dash within range and launch a torpedo that could sink a 27,000-ton heavily armored battleship. The most effective defense against this was to use a number of small-caliber rapid-fire cannon. For Texas, this meant installing 21 5-inch 51 caliber guns. 9 were mounted in starboard casemates located in the hull on the second deck. Another 9 were mounted in the same location on port. A single gun was mounted in the stern as a stern chaser, and 2 more were mounted on the port and starboard sides on the O1 level, one level above the main deck. This was an impressive weapon. The 551 used a 25-pound bag charge to propel a 50-pound projectile to a muzzle velocity of 3,150 feet per second, which is faster than most hunting rifles. Here are 3 powerful rifle calibers that give a 1/2-ounce bullet as much as 3,100 foot-pounds of striking force at 100 yards. In comparison, the 5-inch 51 could strike a target located a mile away or almost 18 times the distance with more than 5,300,000 foot-pounds of force. Its firepower was further multiplied by an 8-round-per-minute rate of fire when served by a well-trained and conditioned gun crew. To give you an idea of what this looks like, here's a Marine gun crew on a 5-inch practice loader on Battleship Texas in 1931. The film shows them reload 6 times in only 22 seconds, including brief pauses for aiming and firing. With that, any approaching enemy could expect as many as 10 of these guns to open fire on them. Even if only 1 in 10 of the 50-pound explosive shells found its mark, a total of 80 fired in 1 minute would result in 8 striking a lightly armored ship and quickly overwhelming it. This was an exceptionally good defense against fast-moving, lightly armored surface targets. However, poor positions on the ship meant that many of the guns stayed wet and were ineffective. As threats and tactics changed, the need for 21 guns lessened. As a result, their numbers were reduced over the years so that only 6 remained by 1942. However, that did not mean they weren't needed and put to good use. In fact, they gave excellent service at Normandy, where they supplemented the 14-inch guns by firing 272 rounds to eliminate German machine gun and mortar nests. They went on to save Marines' lives at Iwo Jima and Okinawa, where they fired almost 4,000 rounds to neutralize enemy emplacements. It was a very manual gun with no powered ammo hoist or loaders. This worked both for and against it. Its lack of power assist meant that it couldn't fire as fast as the later 5-inch 38 caliber that was the gun of choice during World War II. However, its simplicity made it easy to learn and shoot accurately, and it could be placed anywhere, from the decks of cargo ships to the beaches of Wake Island. On December 11th, only 4 days after Pearl Harbor, Marine crews manned 6 of these guns spread among 3 emplacements on Wake Island. It was there that they made an historic stand against the Japanese invading force. Gunners began firing upon approaching ships at 6:15 a.m., and within 45 minutes, they scored hits on 4 destroyers, sinking one and forcing the others to turn away with damage, one of which was later sunk by aircraft. They also scored hits on a light cruiser, forcing it to retire, and hits on 2 patrol boats. Even a troop transport was struck at an extreme range of about 10,000 yards. This required a range error of less than 90 feet to hit a 20-foot-high target 5.5 miles away. The Marines clearly demonstrated that this aging gun was still a formidable weapon when served by well-trained gun crews. Let's take a look at what made them so good. The gun can be divided into 4 major assemblies. Here we can see the barrel and breech assembly. Even though it's far smaller and simpler than the 14-inch gun barrel, it shares the same basic built-up design, meaning that it's made of a tube, sleeves, and a liner that have been heated and shrunk together. It also has a screw box assembly and interrupted screw breech plug, whose designs are closely related to its 14-inch cousin. These are installed on the rear of the barrel along with the yoke that serves as a bracket that the recoil buffers attach to and serve to restrain the barrel in the slide. The barrel has two precisely machined areas that act as sliding surfaces within the gun slide. The barrels are radially symmetrical, meaning that it's possible for them to rotate within the slide when fired. This can not only destroy accuracy, it can place stress on the recoil buffers and affect breech plug operation. To prevent that, keys are inserted in the top and bottom of each barrel that fit into slots in the slide so that they are capable of only the forward and backward linear motion required to accommodate recoil. Next is the slide that performs four critical functions. It holds the barrel in precise alignment while allowing it to slide backwards during recoil when the gun is fired. This is accomplished with two large brass sleeves that are fitted in the slide and act as bushings. Their machined inner surfaces closely fit the machined contact areas on the barrel to keep it precisely in line during recoil. Extreme precision is required since any looseness here may allow the barrel to whip, ruining its accuracy. The slide also acts as a foundation for the recoil buffers that connect between the stationary slide and the barrel that will slam backward during recoil. The buffers are basically large shock absorbers with pistons that use fluid to slow the barrel's movement during recoil, thus diminishing its peak force by spreading it out over time. The counter-recoil springs mounted inside them absorb much of the recoil energy, then use it to push the barrel back to its original battery or pre-firing position. Another feature is the trunnions that act as pivots on which the barrel rotates to be elevated. These incorporate precision machined brass sleeves that act as bearing surfaces on the two protrusions. Tolerances are critical since even the slightest misalignment may make it difficult to elevate the gun or even cause it to bind. Another part of the trunnions are their frictionless bearings that allowed the barrel to pivot with little more resistance than what was created by the barrel's and slide's own mass and inertia. To learn how they work, see the video, Battleship Texas, How to Swing with a 5-inch Cannon. The fourth function of the slide is to act as a mount for the gun's sight assembly. Let's put off describing that for a moment. The stand, or pedestal, supports the gun on a stable base that contains a large ring of roller bearings that sit in a race in its base. Brass inserts prevent any movement other than rotation of the carriage that sits on the stand. The carriage sits on top of the stand and serves as the mount for the barrel and slide. A ring gear that meshes with the turning gear to rotate the carriage when cranked by the trainer. The pointer and trainer stand on small platforms on opposing sides of the stand, where the pointer elevates the gun and the trainer rotates it to aim the weapon. It also supports the training and elevating gear used to aim it. We can now assemble the basic components by sliding the barrel into the slide from the rear. It's retained in the slide by attaching the two recoil buffers to the yoke with sets of locking nuts. The barrel and slide can then be placed on the carriage by lowering them until their trunnions sit in saddles on the carriage and retained by sliding cap squares on and bolting them into place. Last, but certainly not least, are the optical sights used by the pointer and trainer. When Texas was modernized in 1925, directors were added that sent range and deflection information to the guns. That was used by the pointer and trainer to aim the gun using instruments located in front of them, eliminating the need for optical sights. Once aimed, the director could remotely fire the gun. This method worked very well at long ranges, where the effect of wind and air density combined with own-ship and target movement to make aiming extremely difficult. However, the gun could also be locally aimed and fired by the gun crew with devastating effect at shorter ranges. In order to do that, the pointer, standing to the left, controlled the elevation, and the trainer, standing on the right, rotated or trained the gun. The two moved continuously to keep their sights centered on the target, which greatly increased their accuracy. However, they would never hit the target unless the sight setter kept their sights adjusted. He constantly changed the sight's range and deflection settings by cranking gears that pivoted the yoke up and down or side to side to match information received from the rangefinders and from spotters who gave corrections due to misses. This brings up the last function of the slide, which is to be the foundation for the adjustable sight yoke and assembly. The mount allows the sight yoke to pivot vertically and rotate horizontally to adjust for range and deflection. However, there were two extremely critical requirements that had to be met in order to maintain any kind of accuracy. The action of their movement had to be based upon maintaining a parallel relationship to the barrel regardless of how it was aimed. It also had to do this with absolutely no lost motion, which is any kind of wobble or looseness in the mechanism that could destroy accuracy while still allowing sight corrections to be made by the sight setter. The sight setter adjusts vertical aim by tilting the sights so that the pointer will be on target simply by placing his crosshair on it. It starts with range tables created at the Navy's proving grounds that give shell drop and required barrel tilt for all ranges. This is etched onto a range arc that is part of the mechanism. As the setter receives range information from the director or rangefinder, he cranks a knob that tilts the sight until a needle lines up with the indicated range on the arc. This lowers the sight and forces the pointer to raise the barrel to the correct elevation for the range. Likewise, the setter adjusts the trainer's sights horizontally for deflection or sideways movement of the shell. While other factors such as wind and target movement certainly figure into it, the primary issue is shell drift. All shells drift to some degree due to a combination of gyroscopic precession and their aerodynamics. Like shell drop, drift is well defined at the proving grounds and entered into the range tables. The numbers are engraved into a ballistic drum that is part of the setter's mechanism. With that, the setter cranks the deflection knob to align a needle with the correct value on the drum so that the trainer's sight is moved to align the impact point with the target. With the gun loaded and aimed, the gun crew stands clear and it's either electrically fired from a fire control tower or by the pointer with a squeeze of a firing key. This brings us to the present. For the first time since 1945, cranes, trucks, and repair facilities have come together to make it possible for the guns to be moved from the ship and taken to a properly equipped shop. These 23,000-pound guns are being disassembled, stripped, repaired, repainted, and reassembled. Once finished, they will be fully functional, short of being able to fire a 5-inch round. Doing this work takes a lot of money and a lot of support from individuals who love the ship and recognize her importance in history. To be a part of it, you can either make a purchase from a wide selection of caps, shirts, and memorabilia from Battleship Texas Foundation ship store, or you can make a direct donation. Links where you can go to show your support can be found in this video's description. To borrow from the Texan Army's 1836 battle cry, "Come and save it."